While General Santa Anna was leaping up the ladder in Mexico, General Houston was doing at least as well in Tennessee. Re-elected to Congress in 1825 and promoted to the governorship of Tennessee in 1827, he played a significant role in preparing the way for the election of his friend Andrew Jackson to the presidency in 1828. Tall, of commanding presence, talented in debate, and reliable as a friend, he could foresee no hindrance to his enormous ambition, and his associates were already speaking of him as a likely candidate for the presidency if Jackson, widely believed to be too infirm to hold office for long, did not win a second term. This was not an idle dream, for Tennessee played a vital role in national politics. Representing the growing power of the new West, it would send three sons to the presidency: Andrew Jackson, James K. Polk, and Andrew Johnson. Sam Houston could well have been added to that list. In a state of limited political leverage like New Jersey, he would have had little chance. In Tennessee, he had all before him. He was curiously like Santa Anna in his reluctance to marry. He was now in his 35th year and still a bachelor, and he heard friends whisper that it was imprudent for a man to hold the exalted position of governor without a wife to aid him. After many false starts and tentative engagements, therefore, he settled upon a most winsome young woman from a leading family in Gallatin, a few miles northeast of Nashville. Eliza Allen was exactly half Houston's age, a modest, attractive girl with a good education, a sensitive spirit, and a longing to be married. Unfortunately, it was not Houston she wished to wed. Her heart had been given to a poetic young man of immense charm, genteel bearing, and the romantic allure of a lingering illness that would kill him within a few years. But the Allen family, a large one, was so enchanted by the prospect of a daughter's marrying a governor that they exerted on Eliza more pressure than was proper. With hidden tears and the most profound remorse, she made her parents happy by accepting Houston. When the tall, handsome governor stood beside the delicate little Eliza to face the minister, all doubts as to the propriety of such a marriage were dissolved. Indeed, so elated was Houston that 8 days later he had announced his determination to stand for re-election, and so popular did the marriage make him throughout the state that his election to a second term as governor and later to the United States Senate seemed assured. The Houstons were married in January 1829 on the 16th of April of that year, during the heat of the election campaign. Eliza startled Tennessee and the rest of the United States too, by abruptly terminating their marriage and fleeing in tears to her father's house in Gallatin. That day, Sam Houston resigned the governorship and withdrew from the race for a second term. He gave no explanation then or ever. Some cyclonic difference had come between husband and wife, and he refused on a point of honor to state what it was. She likewise kept silent. He was besieged by friends who assured him if only he would speak, they could clear the atmosphere and reinstate him in the election with a guarantee of victory. Look at what Andy Jackson did. The scandal of his marriage was certainly worse than yours, and he survived, although he had to kill a man to do so. Houston had almost killed his man too, for he prized honor above all. And in those years, such men found it difficult to avoid duels. Some years before, a shadowy political hack had crossed his trail in Nashville, said something improper, and then hired a professional duelist from Missouri to deliver a challenge to Houston, who appointed his own second, a stuffy colonel with a meticulous understanding of the honor code. Harumphing up to the imported Missouri gunman, he said, correctly, "General Houston can receive no challenge from your hands because you are not a citizen of this state." By a series of tricks, the Missourian then enlisted the services of a distinguished general with an honorable record, one William A. White, and it was this man, third in line, who finally issued the challenge, even though he himself had no quarrel with Houston and was in no way involved with the shady politician. Why did Houston go ahead with such a ridiculous duel? His explanation reveals much about the moral climate of the time. Knowing that a coward cannot live except in disgrace and obscurity, I did not hesitate as to my course. On the flimsiest point of honor, White continued to demand a duel and was shocked when Houston, with the right to choose weapons and distances, elected pistols at a murderous 15 feet. At that distance, a marksman could hardly miss anyone as huge as Houston. But friends whispered, "Good old Sam, always thinking. By choosing among his 3 challengers, he winds up with the poorest shot of the lot." It was a real duel. General White, almost fainting with fear, fired and missed. General Houston fired and plugged his man in the groin. "You've killed me," White whimpered. "I am very sorry," Houston said, looking down at him. "But you know it was forced upon me." The fallen general said, "I know it, and I forgive you." He did not die. Houston's indictment by a grand jury in Kentucky on the spurious grounds that the duel had occurred in that jurisdiction was an act of political vengeance by Henry Clay's people, who hated Houston for his work in defense of Andrew Jackson. Nothing came of the indictment, but the duel and its complicated surroundings demonstrated the peculiar code of honor that operated at this time. Now Eliza's brother and uncle volunteered to duel Houston in defense of their sister's honor, a catastrophe that he avoided by assuring them that no dishonor attached to their sister, only to him. Then he challenged the entire state of Tennessee. "I will fight anybody, anywhere, who dares to speak a word against my wife." But his challenge did not lay to rest the nagging question of honor. The good citizens of Gallatin, offended that any cloud should hang over one of their loveliest daughters, did something that astonished Tennessee. They assembled a formal public committee charged with the following grave responsibility. Resolved, that the following gentlemen be appointed a committee to consider and draw up a report expressive of the opinion entertained of the private virtues of Mrs. Eliza A. Houston, and whether her amiable character had received an injury among those acquainted with her, in consequence of the late unfortunate occurrence between her and her husband, General Sam Houston, late governor of Tennessee. The 12-man committee, which took its duties most gravely, consisted of 2 generals, 2 colonels, a major, a captain, 5 distinguished lawyers, and 1 private citizen. The committee met over a period of 48 hours, listened to the witnesses, assessed the situation as best as they could on partial evidence, and concluded that Eliza Allen Houston of Gallatin, Tennessee, was a virtuous woman, that she had behaved with decorum, that no aspersions could be cast against her honor, and that she must be considered by society as merely one more injured female. By a vote of 12-0, they certified that she was unsullied. The committee also recommended that a copy of their formal, many-paragraph decision be broadcast to all newspapers that had taken an interest in the affair, but they prudently refrained from mailing their report until Houston was safely out of the state. With time, several facts have emerged about this extraordinary affair. Although neither Sam nor Eliza ever spoke publicly about the disaster, certain conclusions can be tentatively reached. The difference could not have been what many at the time thought. Each partner later married someone else, who Eliza bearing 2 or perhaps 3 children and Sam fathering 8. There is solid ground for suspecting that Governor Houston came home unexpectedly one day to find his wife sobbing over a collection of old love letters from that frail, poet-like young fellow she now realized she should have married. Houston, appalled that the governor of a great state like Tennessee should be thus humiliated, seems to have shouted at her and she to him, after which they parted. But a Mrs. Robert Martin of their hometown had a much different story, which she told at the time and to many citizens. Governor Houston was outside being peppered with snowballs thrown at him by my 2 daughters. As Eliza and I watched, I teased her about her husband's plight, and she told me, "I wish they would kill him." I looked up, astonished to hear such a remark from a bride of only 48 hours, but she repeated in the same voice, "Yes, I wish from the bottom of my heart that they would kill him." It seems indubitable that he was the one who threw her out, for some years later she was to try valiantly to effect a reconciliation, but he refused. He resolved the pitiful affair dramatically. Ex-governor of a focal state, ex-congressman, personal friend of the president, he took a steamer down the Tennessee River, the Ohio and the Mississippi, then up the Arkansas to resume residence among the only people who understood him, the people of the Cherokee Nation, among whom he would reside for 3 years of painful and reviled exile. On the 17th of December, 1831, the brilliant Frenchman Alexis de Tocqueville, who probably understood American democracy better than anyone then alive, was drifting down the Mississippi River when the steamboat on which he was traveling was hailed by a grubby vessel coming out of the Arkansas River. From it climbed a very tall, gaunt man, unshaven and dressed in ragged Indian garb. His hair was long, his nails dirty, his manner contemptuous. He seems to have spent time with the de Tocqueville, who remembered him as the most horrible example he had seen of one of the worst aspects of democracy. When the right of suffrage is universal and when the deputies are paid by the state, it is singular how low and how far wrong the people can go. He deferred to Houston, this broken ex-governor, as the personification of the unpleasant consequences of democracy. De Tocqueville was right in his assessment of Houston during this period. The Cherokees themselves had given Houston a second name, Big Drunk, a pejorative freely bandied about in those frontier days when the men were accustomed to consume what some bystanders judged an excessive amount. Among the Cherokees, Houston, the drunken exile, opened a little store, as 100 white squaw men had done before, and lived most happily when not drunk, with a Cherokee woman named Tiana Rogers. He never married Tiana in any legal Christian ceremony, for he was still legally married to Eliza Allen, but he certainly married her in the Cherokee tradition and was known throughout the nation as her husband. In any case, it is highly unlikely that he would have been interested in a church wedding because of the cruel rejection he had experienced by formal religion. Back in 1829, during the first days of his separation from his wife and the collapse of his political dreams, he had in his despair sought consolation from the clergyman who had performed the marriage ceremony only a few months before. Dr. William Hume was not surprised that the sinner Sam Houston came before him, an abject man who had never had time to join an organized church when he was leaping from one high position to another. Now, when all had crumbled, he asked Dr. Hume to baptize him, make him acknowledged Christian, and accept him into the Episcopal Church. Reverend Hume, taking his ecclesiastical duty very seriously, realized that this might well be a case referred to in the rhyme. The devil was sick, the devil a monk would be, the devil was well, the devil a monk was he. Accordingly, he sought counsel from the Presbyterian minister Obadiah Jennings, who urged caution, pointing out that the respectable connections of the Lady in Gallatin were much offended and might take it unkindly if the church offered membership to the reprobate who would cause them embarrassment. After prolonged consideration of all the niceties involved, Reverend Hume solemnly reported to the community, "Mr. Jennings and myself, to whom General Houston applied to be baptized, declined on good grounds. An ex-governor of a state was refused admission to the church or its consolation in his time of tribulation, lest such action offend the powerful members of his estranged wife's family." At this time, Sam Houston had not expressed any interest in removing to the Mexican state of Coahuila y Tejas.